Providing a dose of rationality, critical thinking, and skepticism from a conservative atheist perspective, this is the Bitchspot Report podcast. Every week, your host will bring you news of note and commentary on topics of interest in hopes of sparking intelligent discussion on important issues of the day. It's not pretty, it's probably not safe for work, but we tell it like it is and offer no quarter to the credulous, the gullible, or the downright stupid. It's not for the easily offended or for the religiously or liberally minded, but it is about 90 minutes of secular conservative entertainment. So let's get right to the show.
Very merry birthday to me. To me.
Oh, yeah.
A very merry birthday to you.
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
Oh, me?
Let's all congratulate us with another cup of tea. A very merry birthday to you.
And it's a very merry unbirthday to us because we're not doing anything special. It's just another show because we never got any other suggestions. But that's okay because we've got plenty of stupid to talk about, like an atheist mother who is ordered to receive Christian counseling or lose her kids. Ben Carson thinks that religion could be probable cause for searches, so long as it's Islam. UCLA might guarantee students the right not to be offended. A French animal rights group steals a dog from a homeless man. And then we look at the retirement of John Boehner and what this might mean for Congress. So it might not be anything special, but it's episode 100 of the Bitchspot Report podcast. So let's get going. How you doing?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you doing?
Not too bad. A little disappointed that we didn't get any suggestions, like nobody cares. But hey, you know, if you don't care, I don't care.
Well, that's sometimes hard to get comments. Unless we, threaten to set the house on fire. I need to clean my house, so that might actually be helpful on a variety of levels.
Yeah, well, I mean, we tried to get some people on, and things just didn't work out with people's schedules. I mean, I tried to get Hausdorff on now that he's come out of the woodwork again, but he's working like 80 hours a week, and he can't make it, and it just didn't all come together, and I know we waited until the very end, but, you know, it is what it is. So, we're just doing another show.
Well, shows are good.
Shows are good. All right, well, we're going to start off with an idiot of the week, and I know I threw this out there just before the show started, so you haven't even had a chance to look at it, but I wanted to spend a few minutes on a story that popped up recently, that of Martin,
Shkreli?
Yeah. Shkreli, whatever the fuck his name is.
Someone who violates what are supposed to be the actual rules of English spelling.
Well, he's not English, he's Armenian, but that's okay. He's a former hedge fund manager who started Turing Pharmaceuticals, and he bought a rare drug called Daraprim, which is used to treat toxoplasmosis, and people with weakened immune systems rely on the drug to treat parasitic infections. The drug used to cost $13.50 a dose when he bought it, and then he immediately jacked it up to $750 a dose. And now the entire internet is calling him the biggest dick on the planet. Now, yes, it is an extreme dick move on his part. We all acknowledge that. The guy's a douchebag. But people are freaked out about this, and I think this is just more of a sign of our entitlement culture than just getting mad at this guy for doing something that he doesn't have every right in the world to do. And that kind of stuff kind of pisses me off. Yeah, I understand that you need this drug. You have to have this drug. But you act like somebody is obligated to provide it because you want it, and that's just not how shit works.
Well, in this case, one of the things is that it's a drug that is in the public domain. I mean, the problem here, at least for America, and, you could still get this drug out of America for, very low price because it's manufactured by other companies. But what it is that, for people who don't know, the FDA has a fairly draconian, and by draconian, I mean really draconian, requirements for licensing drugs for sale in the United States. Now, there's a good reason for that. Just Google thalidomide if you don't know. But even drugs that have been proven have to go through a lot of licensure, and niche drugs like this, there's companies all over the world manufacturing it. It's just not a big enough niche for them to really honestly feel it's worth it to go through all the regulatory process of putting this thing into America. So, this is in many respects an artificial shortage. My bet is that he was trying to make a lot of money very quickly, because fairly soon I would expect the FDA, somebody would come to the FDA and ask, hey, can we fast track approval of the same chemical drug for the United States? The FDA would probably say, sure. It's a douche move. There's been comments from other very wealthy people saying, yeah, this is the great kind of move that gives us a very bad reputation. He does have the right. I mean, he has the property right to do it. And, some of the internet's been talking about, public domaining the drug. That's not going to happen. And, really seriously, given how disproportionately things like eminent domain, whether it's of intellectual property or actual physical property, impact the poor, you should be happy it's not going to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly, this is a drug that wasn't selling well and wasn't profitable in the first place, which is why it was up for sale. And as you said, there are no generics in the U.S., even though this drug is 62 years old. Generic should be commonplace, because anybody on any drug over 17 years, anybody can make the identical drug for whatever price they want to.
Right. If they go,
nobody wants to make this drug because it's not profitable to make.
Well, it's a niche drug. I mean, it's a very, very niche drug. Again, I think my personal belief is that for whatever reason, he needed to raise a lot of money quickly, and this was a way to raise it's not a long-term strategy. It's a short-term strategy. And of course, I think one of the biggest problems is that, he's very arrogant online. I've seen interviews with him, and he comes across as the person who feels that, he has a right to do whatever. And of course, even among many in the professional fields, a lot of hedge funds kind of had a bad reputation, because they do have a reputation of never making anything, just taking and, benefiting off, other products. So a lot of it is that America does have this myth that even though, Bill Gates could fucking buy me 1 million times over, or more likely build a robot duplicate of me, he still supposedly is the guy you can bump into at the local store, which you can in a lot of cases if you live in the area. And so a lot of this thing is that he is just somebody who's playing down to the worst of the stereotypes of what people think a rich person should not be. He's already lowered the price. Apparently the guy is a little bit of a nut from his past records. Apparently he tried to buy a League of Legends team, evidently. And, he's had some other issues with stuff. So, he sounds like somebody who honestly, has some habits that make him easy to hate. In this case, he has a perfect right to do what he did. It's his property. It's his company's property. Whether you think it's morally right or not, the law is not about morality. The law is about making society work as much as possible.
Yeah, but I mean, the one thing that a lot of these people don't understand, and it's one thing that pisses me off, is the pharmaceutical industry is a business. It's not a charity. It exists to make money just like any other business. And whether people like it or not, it costs a lot of money to develop drugs. And I get so sick and tired of people going, well, I need it, therefore you just owe me. Nobody owes you shit. Even if you're going to die without it, nobody's obligated to just hand you over stuff just because you need it. I mean, it's like saying, I need a kidney transplant or I'll die. Well, you don't get to go grab somebody off the street and demand their kidney. It doesn't work that way. You die then. That's the way it works.
Well, a lot of cases there's a feeling that the prices are artificially inflated. And one problem is in some cases they are, and in some cases our patent system is kind of screwed up. Although I will point out our patent system in many respects is actually deficient compared to our copyright system. I mean, patents last for a limited amount of time, whereas copyright you can keep renewing, and it costs a lot more to bring a drug from patent to development than it does to bring something else to development, like a copyright. If you're putting a drug on the market, especially if it's the first time drug, obviously this was a public domain drug, but you've got to do a ton of research. You got human trials, you got animal trials, test tube trials. Any step at that process, you may find out that your drug don't work, whereupon all the money you put into it is useless. So yeah, I mean, in some respects, pharmaceutical companies catch the flack. They're easy for everybody to blame. And the other problem is, of course, is that if you look at this, to be serious, people miss the fact that if a pharmaceutical company was a real villain, they would never want to develop any drugs like this. They would want to keep developing dick enlargers. Because people will pay a ton of money for what are essentially cosmetic drugs that don't have nearly the regulatory burden that these other drugs do.
Right.
So, yeah, and, there have been cases of misbehavior in the pharmaceutical industry, but then again, there's been cases of misbehavior in every industry. And there's also a problem that, when you look at some of the issues we have, whether or not you agree with, like, European-style taxation, European-style socialized health care, really, if you're looking at a highly expensive drug, often the problems don't start with the, pharmaceutical industry. They may be lodged with the insurance industry or higher than normal prices at the hospital. But it's an easy target. Oh, and naturally, obviously, if someone's dying, they're going to be upset about it if they can't get the drug, although that's not as common as it's claimed. I mean, in the United States, I've known people who are poverty, well below poverty level of cancer, and they were generally able to get the drugs they need. So, that's not actually as common as it's brought up.
Yeah, but I mean, this kind of entitlement bullshit, not too long ago they brought out that women's Viagra thing, and the fucking feminists were jumping up and down and screaming to have this thing, passed through the FDA, even though it's already been proven it doesn't even fucking work, because, oh my God, there's like 37 dick pills for men, but there's nothing for women. You owe us. Fuck you, people. Nobody owes you a goddamn thing.
And to be honest, that's a strictly, voluntary medication. I'm sorry, that doesn't come into the category of something like insulin, where if you don't get it, you drop dead.
Yeah, but the whole thing is like, all right, I don't even care about whether it's voluntary, whether it's something that you need to survive. I'm talking about you have to do something that caters to my biology because I am owed this thing. No, you're not. Get over your fucking entitlement bullshit. You're not owed crap. If this does not work for the female biology, which we're finding out it doesn't, then it doesn't. And you can't just bitch at the pharmaceutical industry and go, hey, you have to change reality because I want this.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that gets onto an odd thing. I mean, personally, I think Viagra's rather stupid too. I'm sorry, but we have an industry. I mean, remember Smiling Bob?
Yeah.
If you remember him, I mean, the whole, we have an entire industry based around, well, to be blunt, trying to pretend that you're not getting older. I mean, let's face it, a lot of our industry, a lot of these purple little pills and everything, that's why you see all these ads for men where, you take the purple pill and then it's like a 40-second montage of you riding a motorbike, skiing, skydiving, I don't know, fighting a predator and darkest Latin America as a special forces soldier. I mean, it just gets really ridiculous, and I think that is one issue that kind of is at the core of a lot of things, is that people really don't want to age gracefully. They don't want to admit, nah, I'm getting old.
Yep. People get old, like it or not.
The sun is descending towards the sunset that will one day, I mean, we are all going to die. Each and every one. Every person born on this earth is going to die. I think I can take that bet to the bank. And unfortunately, a lot of people, especially today, we have a large number of people who just absolutely do not want to accept that, and they want to do everything they can, including taking pills. That, in all seriousness, if you look at all the things around Viagra can actually be a fairly dangerous drug. You're doing things to put an unnatural stress on your system so you can get Mr. Jones talking.
Yeah.
And the same thing I would assume would go for any similar drug whether or not it worked on women that had the same effect, because it is putting an extra stress on the stream. So it's unfortunate. And in this case, like I said, this is just somebody I think who, for whatever reason, and a lot of it, I think this guy just, surprisingly enough, probably does not understand, PR very well at all. I mean, because I am certain whoever was at his company that was in charge of PR was repeatedly slamming his head against the desk over this. He figured if I slam my head against the desk hard enough, I'll either go unconscious or I'll understand what boss is doing. Possibly both.
Right.
You know what? I'm going to say something, though. I'm going to give a bit of free advice to everybody. If you're ever tempted in a crisis, in a controversy, in something where people are saying bad things about you on the news, if you're ever tempted to respond with Twitter, don't. I've never once seen an official response from anyone with Twitter where it seems like their IQ didn't drop 60 points. I don't know what it is about that platform, but you cannot engage with the public on Twitter effectively.
Well, anybody who uses Twitter, their IQ drops 60 points. Because, Jesus, Twitter is just a frickin' cesspool.
Well, and the problem is that if you're ever trying to say anything other than, hey guys, I'm going out to eat at McDonald's, want to join me, you've got 140 characters. That does not exactly say, I'm going to explain the pricing decisions behind my strategy. And unfortunately, Twitter really plays to we're having a conversation, but so it has all the drawbacks and none of the advantages of face-to-face conversation. So, Martin Shkreli, stop using Twitter.
Yeah,
yes,
well,
dick.
Stop being a dick.
Yes.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get on to the news, because we got lots of stupid. Or even more stupid. That was stupid, but we got more stupid.
And now the news.
Holly Salzman has been ordered by a judge in New Mexico to attend 10 religious counseling sessions or lose custody of her children. Salzman, who's an atheist, strenuously objected to the ruling and has even recorded sessions where they are desperately trying to talk her into buying into religious bullshit. The ACLU has called the ruling problematic, but has so far declined to take up the case. Even though the judge could have been excused if they didn't know that the counseling was religious, Salzman has complained, and the judge has completely ignored her. This is actually kind of a serious thing.
This is highly serious. I mean, this is... Okay, first of all, people need to understand something. When you get involved with CPS, these are people who can come to your house and take your kids with guns. And generally, if a child is taken by CPS, if they are put into CPS custody, if you don't get your kid back in 72 hours, it's very likely you won't get your kid back for 3 to 6 months. If they want to be nasty about it, at the end of 3 to 6 months, they can say, well, the child no longer has a real connection with their parents. CPS, we won't get into a lot of it, but CPS has a lot of issues. And it's very much a gun to your head.
Well, I mean, this really wasn't a CPS issue. This was a child custody issue in a divorce case.
But CPS is always involved in these issues. See, Children's Protective Services, at least in California, if there's custody, they're always notified. In this case, if she doesn't want to play well, the judge could take them to CPS, could give them to the father. But the big problem is that this is a clear-cut violation of the Establishment Clause. You do not get much more clear-cut than forcing someone to go to a court-ordered religious counseling of a religion you do not share at the risk of losing your children if you don't play ball. I mean, this is really this is another good example why you kind of need oversight of these little courts.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that the judge was ignorant of all this. But for people who live in the Albuquerque area, the judge was Elizabeth Whitefield, and she's up for re-election in 2020, so you kind of use your own judgment here. She didn't say, you are going to attend a religious thing. She said, you're going to attend counseling with this individual named Mary Pepper, who had her name up with the court, and apparently when Salzman showed up at Pepper's thing, which she held in a library, which is actually a violation of the rules of the library, she said, well, I'm going to start every single session with a prayer, and my entire approach is to try to get you to turn to God. Now, that kind of thing sucks, but where I'm holding the judge accountable is when Salzman went back to the court and said, this is the crap that's happening. This is why I have a problem with it. I don't mind going to counseling. I do not want to see this individual. And the court entirely ignored her. That's the problem that I have with it.
Yeah, I mean, this is a case of the judge should have immediately. Oh, wait a minute. There's an update to this, actually. Let me see. I just saw this. Let me see what happened. Okay. The presiding family court judge in Albuquerque has recused herself from hearing any cases involving an Albuquerque mother who was court-ordered to attend religious-based mediation services. Elizabeth Whitefield ordered all other family judges from recusing the case, hearing the case as well. Okay, I'm not entirely sure what that means. That may mean that she's decided she cannot, objectively hear the case, and neither can anyone else. But if all the family court judges are recusing themselves, I don't know where she would go to continue to have this done. Maybe a general judge? I don't know. But that's an interesting order, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that she should have just asked for another parenting class.
She did. They didn't. They refused to even acknowledge she asked.
Sorry, not the woman, but the judge should have just given her another non-religious parenting class. The problem is, I don't really see how any religious class at all could work in this case, because if you're dealing with a situation where the person giving the class would be making a report to the court, and that report would obviously be tainted by whether or not you agreed with her religious views. So, I'm not really sure. Now, of course, I don't see much here about the other woman, the faith-based counseling. So, one question is that I don't know if this person is reporting whether or not the woman agreed with her or disagreed with her when she's making a finding of whether or not she's completing the course. That doesn't give them a pass, because obviously you shouldn't be doing faith-based counseling, period. But I don't know if this course has a history of finding people unfit based on their religious beliefs or lack thereof. We don't have that information in these stories.
Yeah, but let's be honest, it doesn't really matter. As long as you complete the 10 sessions, that's all that really ought to matter to the court. But, this Mary Pepper bitch she's making her go home and write reports on what does God mean to me.
Yeah, and
that has nothing to do with family counseling.
And as the atheist, God means to me quite as much as Peter Pan. I see them in the same light. But the problem is that, again, one of the big questions the Supreme Court always asks is, do you feel compelled to answer a certain way? That's one of the tests of the Establishment Clause. And obviously, if you are trying to complete a court-ordered course, which will have an impact on whether or not you get your kids back or what the court says will happen to the kids, because again, remembering that the court can quite possibly say neither parent should get the kids, it is going to have an impact. You are definitely going to consider, will I have a better chance of getting my kids back if I say everything she wants to hear, even though I don't believe in it? And that is a big violation of the Establishment Clause.
Right.
That gets into religious test territory. Whether or not, and again, in this case, like you said, it doesn't matter whether or not the counselor is going to judge her based on that. The counselor could not be impacted at all by whatever she says. It would not change the fact that from the mother's point of view, this could have an impact on whether or not I get my kids back.
Right. This is the same kind of religious crap that we see where atheists are forced by the courts to attend, like, religious drug addiction programs and things like that.
Right.
And the courts have already found that is unacceptable. You can't do that. And that's why you started to have non-religious AA, which I really hate AA anyway, but.
Well, not to mention a lot of the religious programs don't work. It's been found out over.
Well, none of these things work. And let's be honest, any course that starts out and says, hey, you are not in control and you have to rely on somebody else, that's not a good course, no matter how you color it.
Yeah, and and as for the ACLU, why they called it weak, again, it's very possible that right now they were soft pedaling, not wanting to blow something up because the kids were involved. One of the big deals and why this is actually kind of serious is that it does change. Yes, you could probably win this. I'm certain you would win this at the higher appellate level if you brought a lawsuit. In the meantime, however, the mother may be saying, I don't want to run the risk of making a hostile environment with the people who are going to have an impact on whether or not I get my kids.
Yeah.
And, there's a good point there. It's like when they say never talk to cops. Ken White says, yeah, that's great advice. Unless, of course, you're a poor guy in a part of town where the cops get a pass. Then you may not want to stand on your rights because you may not be able to afford what happens. And this is why these kind of things needs to be smacked down at the policy level. This woman should not be having to deal with this. Let's put it that way.
Right. Well, she did do all 10 classes. Yeah. She did get her kids back. And the thing I would be doing right now is turning right around and filing with the ACLU and suing the fuck out of this stupid judge. now that the judge has no say over my kids, now go after the stupid bitch to stop anybody else from having to go through this in the future.
Well, you'd be suing the, judges have such, essentially, I mean, technically not always, but essentially judges have absolute immunity from civil lawsuits. You'd probably be suing the courts, and the government, saying you're not allowed to have these kinds of programs attached to this anymore. But yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, you do need to do something like this, because this puts a person in a position. I mean, let's put it this way. Just imagine if the lady was, say, a fundamentalist Christian, and she was ordered to go to counseling with a person telling her that, how many times does she bow before Mecca, and has she learned about Allah's place for her? People would be losing their shit.
Right.
But that's no different from what we see right, that's really no different from this case. You have a state official who is putting someone in a position of having to play lip service to a belief that is not theirs. And it doesn't matter if you're an atheist, Muslim, Jew, the principle remains the same. The government is not allowed to play favorites.
Right. And they never should be, but unfortunately we're seeing lots and lots and lots of judges out there who are doing exactly that.
Right. And, a lot of this is just because, these are little local judges who probably had about the same voting thing as a local school board. It may be that, with the exception of this, she's a good judge. I mean, we shouldn't fall into the trap of assuming that because a judge is screwed up in one area, they have opened their own freshly squeezed kitten juice factory and back. There are judges who screw up, but who, largely get voted in because they're good judges. There are judges who screw up and get voted in because, they were the only person on the ballot and not many people care. It's just, without being in the community, it can be hard to tell.
Or there are judges who get voted in because the community is a bunch of religious fucknuts, and they want that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they share their belief. Alternately, just to use the alternate method, there's judges who do this program because this is the first time it's really come up. I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of times when these programs are just kind of lay around and nobody even thinks about it, because the community is so homogeneous that it's not really, no one really disagrees with it till you get something like this. Because, I mean, people should know there's communities in America where atheists or even people of other religions than the dominant majority are fairly rare and don't generally come to the attention of the legal system. So it's hard to say. But on another level, shall we go to the fact that if you are a religious person, you may need to be arrested?
Oh, but only if you're Muslim.
Right. Ben Carson. There are a million stories in the naked city, and if you're a Muslim, you may be getting naked, because Ben Carson says he'd consider religion as probable cause for searches. He would be willing to listen to somebody argue that the religion of Middle Eastern refugees should be considered probable cause for searches or wiretaps. Well, willing to listen to somebody, yeah, okay, you could be willing to listen to somebody. The problem is that the answer to this is that I've listened to you. Your position is bloody stupid. You are an idiot. You are wrong, and you should feel bad. Because, first of all, in America, although obviously with 9/11, Islamic terrorism has killed more people, there are more cases of right-wing motivated terrorism in the U.S. than there are Islamic. So if you want to say that religion should be a basis of searching people, obviously you should be looking at Christians. Well, no, you shouldn't, because again, it's a stupid idea. You are literally saying, I'm going to use a religion that, hundreds of millions of people are adherents to, and say that gives me probable cause to search them. Beyond the fact it's a clear-cut violation, I mean, you don't get much more clear-cut violation of the First Amendment than this. The second problem is this would be the kind of ridiculous thing that you spend, your real terrorists laugh all the way to the bombing because all your cops are spending their time just searching people based on idiotic premises.
Right, exactly. I mean, the whole purpose of getting a search warrant is the reasonable expectation that you will find evidence for a crime should the search be executed. Well, you're Muslim is not probable cause any more than saying, well, you're Christian. Well, so what? That doesn't make any damn difference. Having a particular religion or no religion or, it makes no more sense than going, well, they got blue eyes. They must be guilty. That's stupid.
Right. And of course, the other factor is that when you look at things like this, the more you talk about this, the more that, candidates who are supposedly serious, although we all know Ben Carson is not going to be measuring windows for curtains in the White House. But regardless, he's a Republican.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's almost in a dead heat with Trump. He is one of the front runners.
He's one of the front
between
runners,
he and Trump, he has more popularity than everybody else in the race combined.
I don't think he's going to win in the general. Actually, I don't know who the hell's going to win in the general right now because, Trump's I will admit one thing for Trump. He's made the election interesting. But on this case, one of the problems is that when you have people like this, it starts making people think you hate them. And well, honestly, yeah, Ben Carson doesn't really like Muslims.
No, he does hate Muslims. He openly and actively hates Muslims. He openly and actively hates anybody who's not a Christian.
I was being kind to the gentleman.
Why? Why? There's no reason to be kind to this stupid asshole. And I love how he says, well, I don't think this way, but I'd consider. Well, of course he thinks that way. Otherwise he wouldn't bring it up in the first place. Right. He's saying it that way because I think he's tired of catching flack for saying really, really stupid stuff. And did you see how he said he might be okay with a Muslim president, kind of, maybe, perhaps? Because he caught so much shit for saying what we reported on last week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the problems with this is that every counterterrorism expert in the world will tell you that one of the biggest things for counterterrorism, and the FBI's dealt with this a million times, is some guy goes with his buddies at the bar, starts talking about, yeah, I'm going to blow that son of a bitch up. I'm going to show the governments, or, Allah commands me to do this. Everyone looks at him, doesn't make eye contact, and then one or more of them, just as soon as the meeting's over, they pick up the phone and they call their friendly local police officer and they say, hi, Stan or Abdullah or Izumi, fill in the blank. We think you need to kind of watch them because, they've been increasingly talking about stuff. I just had a 30-minute conversation where he asked me where I could get high explosives because I work at a quarry. We think you need to talk to them. And the problem is this happens generally if you are friendly with the community. But if people think you hate them, if people think you're going to arrest them because they're Muslim or Christian or whatever the hell the religion they are, or atheist, they're not going to get in contact with the law enforcement. They're going to keep their heads down because they don't want to be a target. So all of a sudden, with one fell swoop, this idiocy loses you the people who may be able to alert your law enforcement agencies that something is going on. Because honestly, we get far more cases solved due to anonymous tips and super tech drones and people tapping and saying, I'm running an internet search for bomb. And, then your computer melts down because you are an idiot and you type bomb into a search window for an internet search. So, this is actually pragmatically hurtful to anti-terrorism efforts.
This guy doesn't care.
No, he's running to his base.
This is all strictly, completely, totally, and absolutely unconstitutional, which is something Carson clearly doesn't get. Anybody who has no knowledge whatsoever what the Constitution actually says has no business running for the President of the United States.
Well,
but that pretty much describes the entire GOP clown car, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's sad to say when you realize that Donald Trump actually, probably of all of them, has the most reasonable positions. That's scary. But yeah, I mean, they're preaching to a base, and it's just insane what they're begun saying, because guys, seriously, we've got Muslim citizens. These are your citizens. When you get up, if you win, you're going to swear the big oath to defend the Constitution. You're swearing to defend your Muslim citizens as well. And stuff like this, you are really, I mean, just imagine if you had a guy in Germany saying the same thing about Jews. People would be going utterly apeshit. And seriously, honestly, guys, I'm going to say something, is that everyone always brings up, well, Muslims all hate us. Well, no, they don't. This is a situation where, seriously, if we were going to tag Muslims with that, think about how much bad shit Christians have done over the years. It's just ridiculous. And it's annoying, and it's kind of disheartening to see this in a presidential race.
Because the presidential race has become nothing more than It really is a clown car. It's laughable and ridiculous. There are no credible candidates running from any party at the moment. Nobody worth voting for is running from any party. It's assholes on the left and assholes on the right and assholes in the middle. That's how every election is anymore.
But the problem is, and let's face it, it's kind of like negative campaigning. Everyone says they hate negative campaigning, except time and time again, whatever the public says, studies have shown that negative campaign ads work. And, this is one of the problems. If our system of voting if our election system is flawed, ultimately the candidates are only reflecting the policies they think will get them into the White House. If this shit didn't fly, if Ben Carson said something like this and he lost 10% off of his, voting polls because even the people that share, conservative political views said, you're fucking stupid. Why do you think I want to vote an idiot into the White House? This wouldn't go. This works because a not inconsiderable percentage of American voters will go with this kind of position. And that's a flaw in us, not in our, in this case, our candidates are just reflecting us.
Yeah, it's not a flaw in the political system. It's a flaw in the electorate. We're fucked up, not the system.
Which is really sad when you consider that we have today probably better information gathering technology. I mean, hell, I can sit at my computer and do stuff that Joseph Stalin would have killed his mother for. Not that Joseph Stalin would have really, needed much to kill his mother because he was a psychotic lunatic. But, when you have this kind of information gathering technology that you can get anywhere, it's disheartening that you don't use it to a better effect.
The problem is, it's not just information that you can get, it's wingnut crazy bullshit that you can get too. And most people are only looking for what makes them feel good, not what's actually true. That's why the human race is what it is. That's why people are religious. That's why people fall for conspiracy theories. All the stuff that they want to believe because it makes them feel good and because it confirms existing biases and makes them feel special. They'd rather pay attention to that than to what's actually true, what's actually demonstrable with the evidence, et cetera, et cetera. Humanity's really fucked up.
Well, we're better than we were, but yeah, I mean, unfortunately, one of the flaws of democracy, and like Churchill said, it's the worst system we've ever tried except for all the others, is that you don't have anyone testing people. And, that's a good thing because generally voting tests don't get smart people voting. They get people who vote the way the government wants them to vote voting. But it does lead to a situation where you do have a strategy where you can aim at people who will vote for you regardless because you share their biases. Yellow dog Democrats, dyed in the wool Republicans. That there's a reason why, the number of voters who actually decide a election are actually a very small number of voters. Just about everybody else you can ignore. You know how they vote going in.
Right. That's an unfortunate fact, though. Well, let's go and do some more unfortunate facts. God, I hate stupid people.
I like stupid people. They make me feel happy until I realize someone's calling me one of the stupid people. Then I get very angry. But okay.
All right.
Boy.
It's not just sometimes folks who are mad that colleges are too liberal that have a problem. Sometimes, there are folks on college campuses who are liberal and maybe even agree with me on a bunch of issues who sometimes aren't listening to the other side. And that's a problem too. I was just talking to a friend of mine about this. I've heard some college campuses where they don't want to have a guest speaker who, is too conservative. Or they don't want to read a book if it has language that is offensive to African Americans or somehow sends a demeaning signal towards women. And, I got to tell you, I don't agree with that either. I don't agree that when you become students at colleges, have to be coddled and protected from different points of view.
And here we go again. The lunatic left that infests our universities has taken even more steps to coddle the crybaby students who can't handle anyone saying anything they don't like. UCLA may recognize the right for students not to be offended on campus. You're only allowed to voice campus-approved opinions, and anything that might make anyone feel bad would be strictly forbidden. Welcome to modern-day college life, where having your core beliefs questioned is never allowed to happen. Why? Why?
I don't know. One of the problems is that you have a situation which people don't understand that being challenged is not. You're supposed to be made uncomfortable at some point in college. Now, I'm going to say something like, for instance, when they mention what sort of behavior the resolution is meant to prohibit. Vandalism and graffiti reflecting culturally recognized symbols of hate or prejudice. Okay, that's kind of a dumb thing to put on the resolution because that's already illegal.
Right, everything on the resolution is already illegal.
Yeah. Questioning a student's fitness for leadership roles based on the race, religion, ethnicity. Well, the problem with that is, first of all, I don't think you're going to get that past First Amendment. Especially not when, as we just found out, we have a presidential candidate saying religion should be used to determine whether I can get a search warrant for you. But equally, my problem is that, guys, I want to know who the assholes are. If a guy wants to get up and says, I don't think that Jew, that darky, that woman should be a leadership because everybody knows they can't lead, I like that. You know why I like that? Because I know that guy's an asshole. Okay, I know that the words coming out of your mouth I can ignore. But fundamentally, I don't like these things because, first of all, as Volaka points out, it can have a stifling effect on speech because it puts the government, it's no longer a reputational price, it's a price that can see real discipline, and especially with how much money you spend for, school today, that can be a very major factor. Secondly, a lot of this stuff, I think a lot of it should be reputational, because it's a case of this is your asshole filter. If someone uses this in a way of really denigrating another group, you use it to target them. If they move beyond to graffiti and things like that, you slam them with whatever charges the police can slam them with, and then you don't have to suppress speech. You're not suppressing speech. You're suppressing someone who's vandalizing the school.
Yeah, but that's not what these people want. These people do not want everybody to be able to decide, well, these people are assholes and these people are not. They want state-sponsored or university-sponsored or student-sponsored definitions of this is the only acceptable speech that we will have. Anybody who falls outside of that speech is thrown out, so that we just have this giant echo chamber. I mean, this whole thing is really, really, really stupid. According to this proposition, if I went to UCLA, I would not be allowed on the UCLA campus to note that a student confined to a wheelchair is incapable of walking. I can't say that because I'm not allowed to say that anybody with a disability is incapable of anything.
And well, of course, the problem with this is that, for one thing, this kind of would be illegal for UCLA to do, because UCLA says, well, we're not going to call the person with disabilities incapable. That's great. ADA still wants a wheelchair ramp. The fact that people with disabilities are not always allowed, capable of conducting the same actions people without disabilities can do is codified in our law. Rightly so, because believe you me, you don't want to go back to the day when, people didn't have to do that. The other problem is that when you look at this stuff, well, first of all, I think we need to note that there is already law out there. If I sit in a class and start muttering racial slurs while another student's in the class, you don't need this resolution to get rid of me. That's an important point. There is a lot of stuff this resolution claims to cover that is already covered both in law and university regulations. If I go sit into a class and start mentioning that, the professor obviously got here, because she's a Jew and part of the international Jewish conspiracy, I am going to get my butt kicked out of class and possibly kicked out of the university too. That's already covered.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because the Jews are already trying to argue that anyone not accepting Israel's right to exist is being anti-Semitic and therefore will not be allowed to speak on campus. So free speech out the window with you.
And this is one of the fundamental problems. Yeah, this is in the last paragraph. The resolution was set to be considered on September 17th. And Jewish groups pressed hard for the resolution to include the U.S. State Department's definition of anti-Semitism, which holds that denying Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state is anti-Semitic. Such language wasn't included after pro-Palestinian activists said the language would be used to silence them. But that's where we get into the problem. This is a political question. I mean, you can argue that Israel shouldn't have a right to exist as a Jewish state because the idea of a monocultural state is offensive to modern conceptions of statehood. You can argue that pro-Palestinian groups are trying to ban that language precisely so they can engage in behavior designed to, delegitimize the existence of Israel in any form. I'm not going to get into the argument because that's not my point. The point is that this is what happens when you have speech codes. They get politicized as hell, because they are the easiest method to shut down political debates that you don't like. The last paragraph in this story should really be the big reason why you don't like speech codes like this, because this isn't just an apolitical speech code. It immediately, from the very start, has been politicized based on an issue that should not be controlled by speech codes, because it is a legitimate issue of debate on a campus.
Right, and again, so many campuses out there right now, they have these little free speech zones. They're a little square that you have to sign up in advance to stand in for 15 minutes and speak your mind, but only if it's something that doesn't actually offend anybody. Right. No, that's not how reality works. Free speech works everywhere. Okay, maybe you can't stand up in the middle of a class and shout down the professor, but anywhere else on campus, you ought to be able to speak your mind about any damn subject that you want to speak, and nobody ought to be able to stop you. If they don't like it, they can walk away. They don't have to listen. They can engage you in debate. But no, this whole crap about, hey, we don't want to hear anything that we don't like, even fucking Obama says that's not how the hell this shit works. And if Obama has to come out and say it, this is way out in left-wing cuckoo territory.
Yeah, well, also the fact of the matter is in a lot of cases, free speech zones have been found unconstitutional when it gets to the court. Now granted, the court has said, yes, a school has a right to regulate demonstrations and such stuff like that, so you don't have 50 people demonstrating at the front door of one of your main, your main student hall so nobody can get to their fucking class. That's not what we're talking about here, because obviously, yes, you do have a right to regulate stuff on that basis. But the courts have said in several cases that pushing you off the little free speech zones is not always cricket. And there's honestly, people should be very happy for this, because is it free speech if the university or the county or the state or the nation can say, you can have all the free speech you want at that, empty field 10 miles where nobody is? Is it free speech if nobody can hear you? Well, the answer is no, it isn't. And this is a case, as you said, Obama is against it. People have kind of said bad things about Obama. I think we can safely say that Obama has some experience in people saying unpleasant things about him. It's a case of you're deprived also of a valuable part of college experience, which is learning how to defend your position. If you never hear somebody saying, something you don't like, if you're always in a safe zone, you're not going to be able to defend your positions when you are confronted with people who are, attacking them later in life.
Yeah, but these people don't want there to be anything that they have to defend against. They want to be magically right all the time.
Right.
They look at college as an indoctrination center, not as a place to actually learn about the world. They don't want anybody who says anything that they don't like on campus. And seriously, I'm wondering, can a student declare themselves offended by the entire left-wing politically correct garbage that happens on most campuses and demand that it all go away? Can we please have that? Well, no, because they don't give a shit about that. They're defining offense as anything that offends their stupid left-wing hyper-liberal sensibilities. These people need to go fuck themselves.
Well, and one of the problems is that if you look at, part of this, and looking at Obama's comment, the purpose of college is not just to transmit skills, it's also to widen your horizons, to make you a better citizen, to help you evaluate information. I wonder if in part this has come out because, in the last 10 or 15 years, college has become increasingly seen as, kind of like a slot machine. You just put your money in, you pull the slot, you get your diploma out. The idea of it as a really rounded institution of higher education has really been taking increasing hits. And I wonder if this is kind of, in a way, the end result of it, because you don't want to be challenged in that. You just want to go take your courses, get your A's, get your diploma at the end of 4 years, and walk out to your high-paying job, which of course isn't happening so much now because so many people are graduating from college.
Well, yeah, because a lot of people are going to college and they're taking courses that don't make any money. You know, people who are going, well, I'm going to get a women's studies degree or a gender studies degree or all these other things that really have no jobs associated with them. And then they're going, yeah, but you should pay me for this. No.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, and a lot of the problem, of course, is, and this is something I brought up before, is really students go to college, and at least even in my college, there really wasn't a class or anything talking about, okay, let's evaluate what this degree brings you. And by the time you start thinking about that, in a lot of cases, you're already to the point where changing your degree is going to be a fairly big deal. I mean, you're probably going to have to repeat at least a year of school. And I've often thought that really what colleges do need is starting with the pre-enrollment when you've been accepted, but you're not yet in college, and definitely before your first year, because, you know, your first year doesn't matter. Everyone's got to take the same stuff in the first year. Start talking to you, and as part of that, it should be saying, okay, we can't predict the future. But with the information we have now, and again, the BLS is out there. You can Google the BLS. They got 20-year forecasts. Doesn't always work, but, you know, they assuming things don't change. This is your job. This is how many people are graduating. This is how many jobs open up every year. And then you can start to say, well, okay, yeah, this market's expanding. I'm probably going to get a job here. Or, you know, my field is steady state or maybe even contracting, and yet there's a lot more students getting degrees here. Maybe I need to rethink this because that doesn't say good things about job opportunities when I graduate. But that doesn't happen. I mean, that at least in my case, that didn't happen. I don't know. Some schools probably do that, but it doesn't seem something that is universal among colleges, and it really should be. But as to this, you know, one of the problems I have is that, look, some of our best civil rights people, you know, the college students who went down at the Freedom Riders and the voting registration drive during the 1960s, you know, these clean-cut white boys and girls who went to join with the African Americans who were trying to secure their rights. Yeah, they were yelled at, they were spat on, they were beaten. In some cases, they were left in unmarked graves. The world is not always going to be nice, and if you cannot prepare for it in college, again, noting I'm not speaking of like guys calling you, you know, racial slurs. That's not even covered by these because the law has already said, yeah, you can discipline people for that.
Yeah, but the whole thing is, most people who are out there today, they would never get off their ass to do anything. They're too busy typing on the internet. But, you know, if you call these people a bad name, even if it's not a racial slur, just something that they don't like, these people break down into hysterics. These people can't handle being called a name. These people aren't out there getting beaten. These people aren't out there getting killed. These people are being insulted largely for cause because these are a bunch of assholes, and they act like the world is ending.
The world is nicer now than it was when we were growing up. Some cases, these people probably have never encountered that in their growing up years. I mean, I know definitely racial politics at the high schools in my area are far, you know, there's far less problems with that than there was when I was growing up. But yeah, I mean, part of the problem is, see, I'm not so much concerned about bad language. I'm concerned about people who really can't defend their position. Okay, yeah, prejudice is wrong. Why? You know, seriously, why is prejudice? You've got to be able to answer why, or you hurt your cause because people are going to look at you while you're gobbling like a fish, because how can you possibly ask that question? Well, the answer is because I'm trying to make you look like an idiot that doesn't know what you're talking about. You better be able to tell me why this is wrong. I can.
But most of these people can't. They have no idea why it's wrong. And that's how this, and I don't want to say it's necessarily just a liberal thing because you got the religious assholes on the other side doing the same thing. But these are people who have been indoctrinated into these positions, and they can't think about the positions. This is true because it's true because it's true because it's true because I've been told that it's true, and I have no goddamn clue why it's true.
No, it's faith-based. I mean, you know, for example, you know, you got the religious ones coming from the school, and we should be honest, religious schools have been doing this a long time before public schools got into the act, because religious schools have basically had, you know, codes of conduct which say, oh yeah, by the way, I shall never doubt anything God tells me. You know, and this has been, you know, for a long time. Unfortunately, So this is kind of something that's not so much a liberal or conservative thing. This might call it a human thing, in that people are very easily lured into these cases where I do not have to defend this point because obviously this point is an objective truth. When I talk about God or, why prejudice is bad, I'm talking about a physical law like gravity that I don't need to prove because everybody knows gravity exists. But when you're talking about, culture, history, society, yeah, you do have to prove it because it's not an objective law.
Hey, I can prove gravity exists. Anybody who doubts gravity, I will take them to the top of a tall building and push their fucking asses off. Get gravity proved.
Okay, well, before you do that, make certain to sign me up for everything you have, because I think the police will be talking to you after that. But yeah, I mean, gravity is proved every day. It's an objective proof. We don't need to really argue it. But, if you're talking, for instance, well, okay, why is racism bad? I can tell people why racism is bad. I have an MA on why racism is bad. But equally, you'll run up to people arguing, well, why? Why shouldn't we be able to? And that's when you go in and you can defend your point of view. Now, obviously, it's not hard to defend racism is bad because it's so obviously bad. That's not really requiring a lot of deep effort. But you really want to have an argument that is better than you're another. You really want to be able to say, this is why this is bad. This is why I'm backing my position up. This. And you want to be able to do it in front of a hostile audience. Because obviously, you probably won't have to back your position up in front of a friendly audience.
Right, but all of these schools, they have all these liberal positions, but they don't have any defense for any of them. They just don't. So instead of being able to open themselves up to criticism or to attack or to debate, they just want to get rid of the opposition so they can all sit around in their echo chamber and go, see, we're right because we all agree.
Well, and one problem you've got here with these things is that when I look at this code of conduct, the fact of the matter is you would be much better off, and from a legal position, you're binding yourself less by having a code of civility. Discussion shall be civil. That allows you to pretty much cover all kinds of nasty discussion. It's pretty constitutionally allowed. If someone starts screaming epithets, no one's going to say they have a right to scream epithets. But, this kind of thing, like I said, my biggest problem is that, with the Jewish and the Palestinian debate, you see how this stuff just immediately becomes politicized. You can't not politicize it. It just doesn't happen. That's why the founding fathers, they had no exceptions for, freedom of speech, and the exceptions for freedom of speech are still very, very, limited and rare and cannot be content-based in most cases. And the cases where they are content-based, I think that was a mistake on the part of the courts. But,
giving military secrets to the enemy, things like that, treason, that kind of stuff. You have to have that.
You have things like that, but, increasingly things like, material aid and support to the terrorists, that the act that I think was like 5 years ago they passed it, I can't remember, really spread out what constituted professional assistance to a terrorist organization. And there are, there's a fair number of Volaka and Ken White, for example, both found that as terribly widening the state's reach. But we're going off topic, as is so unusual with these conversations. But, fundamentally, anything that starts getting into the political swamp is dangerous to combine with speech codes. The question of anti-Semitism, especially since that debate is so charged on the political issue, that's a case where you really want to sit down and ask, I think the best question is you want to sit down and ask, can a bad actor use his speech code to his own purposes? Can someone who is absolutely not interested in the intent, which is to make a welcoming environment, use the speech code for his political purposes? And the answer in this case is yes, which is why it's a bad idea. And again, the president disagrees with it.
Yeah, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it just shows how far ridiculously left-wing shit this is.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's do our last story.
Oh, yes. Now, this is something that, in the great field of things, we're not talking about a legal case, but we're just talking about here about, this is an ugly confluence of classism, racism against the Roma, and people who just desperately need to get punched in the face. I'm sorry. Because I was looking at this. Basically the case is that an animal group's right, Cause Animal Nord, decided they were going to rescue a homeless man's puppy by grabbing the puppy and stealing it from him on camera while horrified bystanders stood by and watched. It was a terrible, terrible case. First of all, no, they're going to say the puppy was drugged. That puppy was not drugged. You can see from the video. The dog was happy and chilling when it was with its owner. The minute it got grabbed from its owner, it freaked the hell out. I think you saw this video.
Yeah.
So, secondly, no. I don't care if you think a guy is mistreating an animal. In America, and as far as I can tell in France, bystanders do not have the right to take the law into their own hands. Bystanders do not have the right to grab a dog and take it away from a man, unless, again, like for instance, if the dog's dying in a locked car, you can bust the window. If the guy's sitting there, knifing the dog, you can take it away from him. But in a case like this where you're saying, oh, he's using it for begging purposes, if you think there is a problem, you notify your local fucking friendly police officer. You don't run and assault a man, because in America, this is what this would be called. This would be assault. Given that a theft is involved, and I think you could make an argument that you could probably attach a felony to this.
Right. I mean, whether this guy was exploiting his dog or not is completely irrelevant. If it's legal in France, and I don't know if it is, but I'm going to assume for the moment that it is, but if it's legal to beg for money, if the guy wasn't breaking any established French law, then the group has no damn business stealing the animal. And let's be honest, that's what this is. And now the group is online selling the dog.
Vegan. Yes, vegan.
Where the fuck are the police in this? This is out and out theft caught on video by a group who has they were in possession of stolen property, and now they're selling stolen property. What the fuck are the police doing about this?
Okay, well, here's the thing, and I agree. So I spoke to a couple of French citizens, and one of the things, France, unlike America, has very strict privacy regulations about active criminal cases. You don't do the perp walk in France. This is one thing that surprised me. The argument is that until you are convicted, you are not legally a criminal. Ergo, we do not have the right to march you in front of the cameras into the station in most cases. I mean, there have been cases where cameras are there, but they have restrictions on evidently what they can say about active cases. Evidently in France also, if a person is unlikely to flee, arrest is generally not used, unlike America where arrest is quite commonly used. I mean, these are two different legal systems. I can see both advantages and disadvantages to the way the French do things, because obviously the advantage is that you don't have a situation you have in America where the DA will try to convict somebody in the court of public opinion before, he even goes to trial. Disadvantage, I can see a lot of cases where that type of privacy can be used against the suspect if the state wants to get him. They can just say, oh, well, we can't let you know what's going on here. But according to them, it is entirely possible there is a criminal case in process right now, but it will not be really revealed to the public until their version of an indictment or an arrest occurs. I'm going to honestly defer to their reading of that because, God knows, given all the complete idiocy I've heard about the American legal system from foreign people, I don't want to do the same regarding the French legal system, which I don't know much about.
But that kind of thing is fine, and I certainly hope that that's happening. But, I mean, nobody's even reported that this guy got his dog back. That's not something yet. That even without saying, well, these people are arrested and they're being tried for the charge.
But stolen property. I mean, that's the thing I'm surprised at. The dog is clearly stolen property. A man evidently has his vaccination records for the dog. The dog should simply be removed from them as stolen property, which I agree with you. Secondly, the other problem is evidently, they, said he was a Roma, a filthy, begging Roma. Now, for Americans, Roma or gypsies or travelers as they are known, they were right up next to the Jews in Hitler's pogroms. They are not, or Hitler's, genocides. They are not liked in Europe. They are known, and in some cases, truthfully, for, variety of petty crimes. The Roma are what we would call a stateless group. They don't generally have any. Okay, let me rephrase. Let me go back. Many of them, because obviously, we don't want to get into the part of calling one group by an entire, view. But many of them are stateless. They're nomadic, they're stateless, and that has been a problem because that doesn't really mix well with modern conceptions of statehood, where you're supposed to be a citizen of one nation and you abide. So there is a lot of racism against Roma in Europe. And the fact that they then named this as a Roma is also disturbing, because that would be the equivalent of some people in America coming, stealing a black man's dog and saying, well, he's a filthy black man who's just begging. You can bet your ass that about 5 minutes after that, you're going to start seeing hate crime enhancements being added to whatever charge they get. And just on a fundamental level, I mean, seriously, you don't take a man's dog. A homeless man does not have a lot of stuff to make his life happy. I don't care if he's begging. In a lot of places, being homeless is okay. Can I find a place to sleep tonight that is warm, that the cops won't arrest me, but is close enough to, populated areas that if somebody decides to show up and beat the shit out of me, someone may decide to call 911. This is not a fun lifestyle. And I've known homeless people, and generally they take better care of their animals than they do themselves. Because their animal may be the only damn friend they have in the world. This, to me, there's a term that's generally applied to comedians that's called punching down. You're not speaking to authority. You're finding the fat kid that, can't fight back, and you punch down. This was punching down. This is 3 people jumping a homeless guy who, may have been unable to fight back, was definitely older than they were, was definitely unprepared for this, and taking his puppy, who does not look hurt, and are now selling his puppy. And of course, they have named him vegan. They have named an omnivorous animal which really needs to eat meat vegan.
Well, they're not bright. We got that part.
Yeah, but I mean, this is another case. These are perhaps the worst kind of activists. To be brutally honest, I'm going to Godwin. I'm going to go there. Hitler loved his dog. People like this often have no love for their fellow humans.
Oh, no. These people, and this is true of like PETA and all the rest of these groups. These are people who out and out, they want humanity to go extinct. They want to wipe humanity off the face of the planet. They hate people. I wish they'd start with themselves and just go shoot themselves. But, they hate people with a passion. They want animals to all go back to living together in friendship. Yeah, tell that to the lions and the gazelles. But, they've got this bizarre idea that animals are all just magical, mystical friends if people would just go away and leave them all alone. And that's just not how nature works.
Yeah, and the thing is that, and it also gets to the point, is that, look, you want to help people. I can find a lot better animals than, say, an animal that looked well treated, definitely was panicked and upset to be taken away from its owner. And again, it also gets to the point of, no, property rights are a thing. The right to be secure in your property is not something you leave at the door if you are not rich. And in fact, in America, we've had several cases where counties have grabbed homeless people's shit, they've trashed it, and the courts have come up to them and said, yeah, you know what? That was sort of their property. You don't get to do that. And also the assault. I mean, obviously a violent assault, because a violent assault is a threat of further violence if you don't give way. When someone comes up to you and steals your dog and is violently taking your dog, the implicit threat is, we're going to do whatever it takes to get this dog. And if that includes beating the crap out of you, and again, if he is a Roma, there is a legitimate fear, because in the past, and I'm not talking recent past, it's been plain that, these people, many of these people do not get a fair shake in European courts. And also, of course, there's another factor, is that if you're adopting an animal, why aren't they giving it away for free? That looks more like we're selling stolen property.
Yeah, exactly.
But, and of course they're right wing. As near as we can tell, there's been a variety of comments that these people are evidently a group with ties to right wingers. So also I have a firm consideration that it may be that the assault on him was more or less due to the fact that he was a Roma, according to them. Which, may or may not be the truth, because we all know that racists have such a good record in actually picking people who are of the race that they claim to be hating. Quite often they get somebody else, but they don't care. So my personal wish, I don't own a gun. I got to admit this. I don't own a gun, and I'm not generally one for violence. But I will say one thing that's nice about right-wing America, and I think, or any part of America, I would have truly enjoyed to see them trying this, say, down in Austin, Texas, or Chicago, or New York. There's a lot of places in America.
Well, guns are illegal in New York, so I guess that doesn't matter.
Well, no, guns are illegal in New York, but New York has the highest rate of gun ownership probably of any place in the United States. I mean, I pity the aliens that invade New York when they say, well, guns are illegal in New York, Zorplet. That means there'll be no Americans with guns in New York.
Yeah, tell me another one.
Yeah, cue many gunshots as the aliens come back and, well, that didn't work very damn well. But yeah, I mean, and also, for this group, you probably wouldn't need guns. But in all seriousness, what got me here was, okay, I understand why people didn't get involved. That is a well-documented social effect. That one person may take action. If he's part of a group, he may do nothing. But, I had a hard time thinking about what was going through this poor guy's mind. You're assaulted on a street, your companion is taken away from you, you have no options, and no one is doing anything. No one is coming to your aid. And that probably goes from just horrifying to just utterly soul destroying, because I'd like to think that if I had been there, I would have done something. I may not have, because we're all heroes in our own mind's eye until it actually happens. And then sometimes we don't actually behave like we wish we would have. But, what this poor man needed was for a group to come to his aid. And the problem I have is that, people who are thinking about buying the dog and giving it back to him, I would like to do that, but my problem is that legitimizes, theft. The dog should not be given back to him for money. The dog should be given back to him for free. The dog should be given back to him with a large amount of money to compensate him for the trauma of being fucking assaulted on a public street. And that's one thing I would like to see, and I haven't seen anything that's happened to this, but I'd like to see civil suits. I would, in America, you would certainly be able to file a civil suit for, personal injury, infliction of emotional harm, I can't think of what else, but, you'd definitely be, I'm fairly certain if this happened, you get a lawyer. A lawyer will be coming to you, actually.
Absolutely.
But I'm hoping this works out well for this guy. I mean, obviously it can't work out well for him at this point, given everything that's happened, but I'm hoping he gets his dog back and he gets some fucking compensation.
Yeah, let's hope.
In fact, we should probably revisit this. Put a news filter on my Google and we'll see what happens with this. Because, this is something that needs to have a happy ending for me.
Right.
But.
Alright, well then we should probably get on to the main event.
This is the main event.
Okay, well, as everyone knows, John Boehner has resigned, or he's going to be resigning, not just from the position in the House, but from politics in general. There are some that think that when the Pope spoke to him, his withered soul grew 10 sizes. I don't honestly think it was that. I think, on the one hand, he's been trying to get the Pope to come to the Congress for basically ever since he was in Congress. The Pope came, while he did not say everything that the right wing in Congress wanted to hear. The fact of the matter is that you could see him saying, hey, look, this is probably the high point of my career. Secondly, I don't really like John Boehner. I'm liberal, he's not. But the fact of the matter is, I got some sympathy for a guy that increasingly in his house has been trying to manage the insidious fusion of a kindergarten class and a room full of rabid badgers. And this is his own party. I'm not talking about the Democrats. I'm talking about his own party in this case. I mean, he has been in a position of having to deal with Tea Party groups who are unwilling to negotiate. I mean, many of them said, we don't negotiate. We want to shut down the government. We want to do this. We want to do that. You're never right-wing enough for us. You're like that rhino, Reagan. And one of the problems is I think he's just gotten sick of the continual fighting. Because sadly, whether you like it or not, part of being in politics is making deals. And he's had to deal with a very large segment of his own party that is totally allergic to making any deal whatsoever, and that doesn't work. In fact, if we go back to the government shutdown over Obamacare, it's widely believed that the Tea Party cost the Republican Party because Obama was willing to give up a ton of shit. I mean, if you remember the news stories of that time, the Democrats were pissed off as hell over what he was clearly willing to give up. But the one thing he wasn't going to give up was going to be the signature achievement of his administration. Well, the right wing pushed him and said, we want you to give up the signature achievement of your administration. And that didn't go well for them. And Boehner knew it. And so I think with this, it's just he's tired. He's tired of basically fighting a battle that seems to be almost more against his party than it does against the Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, while I'm not a fan of Boehner either, I will say that I think he's a symptom of the real problem, that the GOP has moved so far to the right that they no longer have any cause to compromise. They're always right. The Democrats are always wrong, and anything that anyone says that disagrees with them, it's heresy. But of course, the extreme left is the same way, as we saw back in our story on Those Who Shall Not Be Offended. I mean, this country has turned into a disaster of political ideologies walking in lockstep who cannot come together to solve problems.
Well, right now, the left has the problem. Of course, now by European standards, the Democratic Party would be probably center-right. Obama's been described unironically in a lot of other foreign newspapers as a center-right president. And, the problem is that in some respects they're right, economically, though not, culturally and economically, but the Republican Party has responded by increasingly moving further and further to the right. And in a way, this is kind of the creation, the Tea Party was the thing that was going to make the Republicans powerful. It was going to be the grassroots group. But unfortunately, they don't seem to understand that America's government system is designed to only work if you can get some level of consensus. I mean, really, the founding fathers, if you look what they put into our system, they were more interested with putting clauses in that shut things down than get things moving. And if you go into this with anything other than an absolute supermajority, and I'm talking the kind of majority nobody's ever really had in American politics, you can't take this, take no prisoners attitude. And of course, you're right. We flip around. We have segments of the Democratic Party that are the same way. But of course, right now it's the Republicans who have the majorities, and everyone is. And the Democrats, of course, have a larger segment of what would be called blue dog Democrats, a larger segment of conservative Democrats. They don't really have the same Tea Party style faction in their own party right now. And of course, again, because they're not in the majority, they're more unified in opposition to the Republicans.
Well, I mean, the problem is that both the Democrats and the Republicans have lost a lot of their moderate wing. Mm-hmm. I mean, in 2010, the Democrats pretty much purged themselves of the Blue Dog Democrats, which gave all those seats to the Republicans, because you had moderate to conservative Democrats who were holding all these seats in relatively conservative districts, and then the Democrats said, we're just going to run hyper-liberals in these districts. Well, they lost, and that's why things switched over in 2010.
Right, and of course one factor in 2010 also impacting it is, it was a midterm election. Midterm elections always benefit the Republicans, because I want to say something about the Democratic Party. You're stupid. You're stupid because you can never motivate your fucking base to get out during the midterm elections. The midterm elections are important. Your president doesn't get much done if he doesn't have a majority in Congress. But, the Democrats have always had, and young voters in general have always had this issue where, it's like pulling teeth to get them to come out during the midterm elections. Oh, they'll all come swarming out during the, presidential election, because that's when MTV runs all their get out the vote shit. But, during the midterm elections and also local elections, the Democrats have always had a major, major problem getting the base out to vote. The Republicans, and this is one reason why the Tea Party's become so powerful. The Tea Party shows up religiously. They show, I would be surprised if very many Tea Party people at all who identify as Tea Party miss a midterm. This is one reason why they're so powerful and why they were able to deliver so many votes. But they don't really know what to do with it. And in fact, I think one problem is that the Republicans, especially the freshmen, especially the new Republicans, don't understand that the dynamic that works when you're a minority party does not work when you're a majority party. And this is probably an issue why Boehner is wanting to leave. I mean, because like you said, the Democrats have lost a fair number of their moderates. The Republicans have lost a lot of moderates. And of course, with the way our states are functioning now, especially with the gerrymandered districts, in a lot of these cases, with a very few exceptions, you don't have to worry about being replaced by a Democrat or a Republican. You have to worry about being replaced by your primary challenger.
Right.
And that's moved things also to the right and to the left, because if you're in a situation where you know the person in the seat is going to be a Democrat, going to be a Republican, your real challenger becomes your primary challenger. Now, granted, in the last elections, the Tea Party lost a fair amount of their strength in the sense that they did run primary challengers, and they didn't have a lot of luck at that. So, but you still have a situation where you have a lot of people in Congress who are really gunning for Boehner. And, emotionally, seriously, it must be wearing to realize that a good chunk of your own party hates you as much as they do the Democrats.
Well, it's because he's not extreme enough. I mean,
Right.
You've got the Tea Party who has, just like the Democrats tried to wipe out the Blue Dog Democrats, the Tea Party has actively tried to purge the party of anyone who isn't religiously batshit insane.
Which is to say,
he isn't. And therefore, everybody hates his guts.
well, he honestly understands that, seriously, guys, blowing the debt ceiling, shutting down the government for 6 months is not going to win you friends,
Especially because the government isn't actually shut down.
Well, yeah, they always have, and you don't want to shut the government down. That would be amusing, if they somehow got their way and seriously, honest to God, completely shut the government down so that all of a sudden when you go to, get your property deed renewed, you find out that the court is shut down. When you go to make a business agreement, you find out that there's no one to record your contract. Oh yeah, I bet that would play so well with the American people.
Hey, as far as I'm concerned, the first thing that ought to happen when the government shuts down is all of Congress, the presidency, and the judiciary, they stop getting paid.
Yeah, well, actually,
You'd never have it happen again.
There's a case going on in Kansas right now, I think, where there is a law. Yeah, it was Kansas, Brownback, who is another one of these really hyper right. They basically had a law that if the courts ruled against them in a certain area, they were going to completely defund the courts. This is obviously going to be going up to various courts, may end up in the federal court because it's a separation of powers question. But, that would be an interesting thing to do, because obviously if you do that, there is going to be no avoiding the fact that every minute the government's closed, your people are suffering. I mean, because if the courts are shut down, a huge chunk of what makes modern civilization work is shut down. Cops can't get warrants. You can't get indictments. You can't, you can't sign for stuff. But going back to the federal question with the Tea Party is that, you have to understand is that the Tea Party is more right-wing than Ronald Reagan. He's their patron saint. They make him look like a liberal.
Well, compared to them, he is. But then again, he wasn't really that hyper right wing. He played, he gave it lip service, but he wasn't really.
Yeah, I mean, and, he raised taxes. He had, a number of things going on. And, then there's Eisenhower, who really was probably one of the most iconic examples of the old Republican president. And, today you could, honest to God, run Eisenhower as a Democratic candidate. Seriously, Eisenhower, you could run Eisenhower as a Democratic candidate, and he might actually be to the left of some of the Democratic candidates we have in the pool. The dialogue in America has really sort of shifted to the right politically, and it's not the pragmatic Republican Party of old. I think this is the biggest problem, is we've lost pragmatism. And, pragmatism says, I don't like this deal, but hey, guess what? It's the best deal I can get. It's not an impossible deal. I'm just going to go with this deal because, guys, what do we want to do? Do we really want to shut the government down over this? I mean, if you take a look at the number of filibusters being used, there's a growing sense that it's my way or the highway. And that is, that's one problem I occasionally have with some Democrats that say the Democratic Party should, emulate the Tea Party. And no. Because our government doesn't work like that. You can kind of sort of have a government work like that if you have a European-style parliamentary system, because governments don't stick around that long. But our system absolutely does not work like that. I mean, we've already got Congress threatening to undercut the president on Iran. We're getting to the point quickly where foreign nations may have a serious question about whether or not they can trust the U.S. to hold to its policies.
I wouldn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the problem, because, you get Republicans saying day one, we're going to cancel the agreement with Iran. Well, yeah, that may not have been a treaty. Granted, most of our international agreements aren't treaties. But you pay a very real price. If people think they can't trust you and that every administration is going to see a complete overturn of foreign policy and the elimination of agreements, they're not going to want to make many agreements with you. It's like when Congress sent the letter to Iran. The Tea Party sent that letter to Iran saying, oh, by the way, the agreement you have, it's not worth anything. That's just a clear assault on traditions that are very, very old. That, politics stops at the shore. That, and we have this continued thing, and I think Boehner just increasingly got tired of it. He can resign, he can go off and, write his book or become a lobbyist, whatever he wants to do, but he no longer has to deal with this situation where it seems like he is a bigger target than the Democrats are to a lot of these people.
Well, I mean, Boehner was famous for saying what's good for the party is good for the country, but I don't buy that at all. The party exists to get into power. That's the whole purpose of the party even being around. It panders to voters. That doesn't mean that what the party says is actually good for the country, because they have a chunk of voters who might want it, so they're going to go for it. I mean, you get gay marriage, you get abortion, anti-Muslim sentiments, anti-Iran sentiments, all this other stuff, and I don't think you can defend that any of that stuff is actually good for the country. So I don't really get where the Republican Party or even the Democratic Party are actually good for America anymore.
Well, you can argue, gay marriage is good for the country because it improves the rights of Americans. So
yeah, but they're not for gay marriage.
Well, okay, I misunderstood you. Yeah, that fight. Well, the problem is that we are in a situation, and let's face it, the Republican Party's problem is that they have tied themselves not just to economic conservatism, which even many Democrats agree with. You have conservative Democrats who are fairly conservative economically. They've tied themselves to cultural, social, and religious conservatism, and that's changing. And what they're saying is good for the nation is increasingly something that is not seen as being good for the nation. I mean, this is one reason why they focus so much on salacious sexual. They keep trying to, we're going to make America good. We're going to get rid of all that terrible, sexual stuff. Most Americans don't give a damn. Not to mention the fact that generally if you find out a Republican is talking about how much he hates degeneracy, you're going to find out he's got a close personal relationship with, someone he's not married to, or the pool boy, or, something like that. Or a
pig.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, that's David
British.
Cameron. That's something else.
That's British. Sadly it is. So we can't talk about it, but it would be nice. But yeah, I mean, the Republican Party has tied themselves to an increasingly small, increasingly virulent strand of cultural, social, and religious conservatism. And that is really one of their big problems, which is why I honestly think in the long run they are far worse off than the Democrats, because it's easier to change your economic stance than it is to try to change your religious stance. I mean, you look at a lot of what this is saying, like Ben Carson with the Muslims, they've jumped into the culture wars, and they're losing the culture wars. And
they lost the culture wars before they even started.
Well, yeah, because the culture wars are mostly, to be blunt, if you want to strip it of everything, it's, okay, I can be a dick to people I don't like. And to their credit, a growing majority of Americans say, no, you can't. If you don't like gay marriage, hey, that's fine. That's not your thing. You don't get to say nobody else gets to do it. And I don't think the Republicans have understood this. I mean, as one person said, when the Pope sounds more liberal than you are culturally, you got a problem. And this is something that the Tea Party is increasingly, they're using their ability to obstruct government because I don't think that they understand just how out of tune they are with a large number, a growing number of Americans.
They don't care.
No, they don't. Well, they don't care and they don't know. Well, I think it's a combination. They don't care, but they also don't understand how this can be losing because by their worldview, earlier we talked about people who can't really defend their worldview. Their assumption is that religion is like gravity. Obviously, if I am religious, obviously, if I'm socially conservative, I'm right. It's like gravity. I don't need to defend it. And this is a case where, this paranoid worldview is gradually losing strength with Americans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they talked in the article about Barry Goldwater, and Barry Goldwater, he's somewhat of a hero of mine as far as I ever have any heroes. And he certainly, he wasn't at all representative of the current crop of pseudo-conservatives that we have in the GOP. I mean, even though he was religious himself, he was very outspoken in his opposition to religion being a part of the Republican platform. He saw that it was just a train wreck on the way, and he fought it tooth and nail through the rest of his political career, and nobody listened.
Right.
And he foresaw all the crap that has happened in the modern day Republican Party. He foresaw that it was just going to be a complete clusterfuck. And that's what it's become.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get into the problem of if you become identified with religion, you automatically start cutting off a group of your people. And also, Barry Goldwater, for instance, his father was a Jew and his mother was an Episcopalian. He understood that, you're playing with dynamite. Because, again, we get to the point, I think a couple of sessions ago, we talked about the Republicans and Latinos and the Republicans. Latinos are one of the fastest growing groups in both the middle class and founding small businesses in America. They should be natural allies of the Republicans. They would be natural allies of the Republicans if the Republicans had not dove into this kind of cultural war BS. If the Republican Party was, we are the party of small government, we are the party of small government and low taxes, and other than that, honestly, we are not interested in your religion. We back traditional American virtues. Yeah, there would still be a difference between them and the Democrats, but you would have a lot more people crossing over because there's not this feeling the Republican Party doesn't like us. Because I know people right now who are Democrats mainly because they feel the Republican Party does not like them in a very deep way, but their economic stance, moderate Republican. And that is a case where, and where the Republican Party, by tying themselves to these groups, has, I think, critically injured themselves. I mean, the Republican Party will never go away, because, it'll just morph and become something different under the same name. But I think this current crop of the Republican Party has critically injured themselves, especially since they're unwilling to see it. They're unwilling to confront the Tea Party and say our way or the highway. You see that, I mean, you basically see that on every current GOP presidential debate. The groveling way they're appealing to the right wing right now because they need them for the primaries.
Yeah.
And that's going to stick with them. I mean, because somewhere there is a Democratic PR operative in the secret Democratic headquarters buried deep under the McDonald's HQ. I don't know if that's where it is, but knowing most operatives, they need a lot of bad food. But anyway, he's sitting there and he's got a smile on his face with a TiVo. And during all these debates, when someone's saying something that they're intending for the right-wing base so they can get the nomination, he just grins and he hits record. And he's filing this under, this is what our ads. And that's the problem the Republicans got. This Tea Party base poisons them because what they have to say to the base is not what the general electorate wants to hear. It's not the policies the general electorate wants to hear.
But these people don't care.
No, they don't.
They couldn't care less what the general populace wants to hear.
Because the Tea Party in Congress is, again, especially the House. I mean, we gotta remember, Boehner is the House leader. And the House is much more clown car than the Senate because they're only there for 2 years, which means, you get elected and you immediately have to start preparing for your challenge and to get reelected. And it's a lot more freshmen, and so it's also all these dinky little districts, which can be, hey, I got elected because, I know 50 guys in a district. That's all I need to get elected in this district. But, he's in a situation where these people don't care because their own seats are not simply secure. They're made more secure by the more crazy you can get. This is kind of like government a la Joker. The more crazy you are, if you're a Tea Party Republican in the House, the more likely your district is to vote you in. And you always have to watch out for the danger of someone being even more crazy. Because let's face it, that's another factor. The Tea Party people who were the frothing firebrands of 5 years ago are now either seen as rhinos or at best are seen as moderate. They've been out crazied. So, and that's another problem. I mean, the crazy is getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the problem is because both sides, they're really only appealing to the extremes. They don't really care about anybody in the middle because the people in the middle, they don't really have a choice.
Well,
they've kind of got a voting base that has to vote for you because they're really voting against the other guy.
Right, and the problem is, and this is why things like open primaries, redistricting to get the hell rid of all these gerrymandered districts, this is really what we need. This is why it's also been fought. So, both parties are willing to do whatever they can to keep an effective redistricting scheme from coming into operation. But it's what's needed, because this is not going to be solved until you can safely say, if trying to appeal just to my radical right, left, whatever wing base is not a key to victory in my district, it's a key to loss. The day that we can actually ungerrymander these districts so that a conservative, okay, granted, you're not going to get a San Francisco liberal winning in Texas, but the day when you can say that this district is now even enough that a Democrat who is in line with the general political thought of his district has an equal chance to win against a Republican who is in a that's the only way you're going to neuter these crazy groups. Because these crazy groups survive because they dominate the primaries, and as you said, no one has a choice in the general election, and the districts are so lopsided in the general election that there is no realistic chance. I mean, hell, some of these districts, the Democrats/Republicans don't even bother to run a candidate in the general election. Why waste the money?
Right.
And,
well, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, this is really where we get people like our buddy Klingenschmidt out of Colorado, that crazy guy who tried to exorcise the demons out of Obama and thinks gay people are soul stealers. These are people who are getting elected in the Republican Party.
And they're getting elected because there's no real chance. I mean, I keep going back to California. Our redistricting was not ideal. It was probably about as good as you could get given the political situation. It wasn't ideal. But even so, I mean, there were a ton of people who had been around forever who just didn't even bother to run because they knew they could not run in a competitive district. Now, when you've got a situation where even our imperfect redistricting has guys just quit because they say, well, you know what, I can't run and I can't win unless I can game the system. That shows just what a crying thing we need. I mean, really seriously, Boehner is a symptom. The Tea Party is a symptom. My personal belief is our districting problems is the real disease. We've allowed Congress, we've allowed the states, we've allowed all these various groups to create safe districts for decades, and the ultimate creation of a safe district is a district that does not have the interests of the United States at heart.
But I don't think that's even the real disease. I think that's still a symptom. I think the real disease is the American voter who it's our responsibility to keep the government under control. And we have completely abrogated that responsibility. We vote for, hey, who's going to tell us that they're going to give us free shit instead of who's going to do what's actually good for the country.
You can't get rid of that because a lot of people will just do that regardless. I mean, that's why, let's face it, that's why, Johnson got the space program through by basically, well, guys, there's a reason why the space program's all in the South. If you want to map where NASA has its big installations, map who was influential in Congress during the 1960s. That was pork for their districts. But the thing is that ultimately, we can't do anything about that, but I do think, districting can help the situation. Anything that widens up the amount of choice people have. I mean,
yeah, but you're still going to have the stupid, crazy religious fucks voting for the stupid, crazy religious fucks. You're still going to have, I mean, let's be really honest. I don't care how you redistrict San Francisco. They will never elect anybody but a hardline left liberal. It ain't happening.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, you've got certain areas where, yeah, and that's going to be the reflection, I don't know. I honestly think you might be wrong. I think that there could be possible room for a pro-business, socially liberal Republican to make a challenge, but probably not going to win. But, then you get like some of these districts down in Texas. There's districts that look like an octopus making love to a hat rack. I mean, they're not even geographically contiguous. You get rid of those, you may start seeing more choice. And when I say choice, I mean choice in the general election. What I think you need to do is make certain that as much as possible the election isn't decided with the primary. Now that's not always going to happen. I mean, obviously you'll have cases where one party for whatever reason is odds-on favorite to win. That's fine as long as they have some chance of losing if they ignore the general election. But, we have places today where the party literally has no chance of losing, even if they don't even have to run an ad during the general election. All the ads come during the primary because the general election is a lock.
Yeah. I still think that there's a lot of areas where I don't care how you cut it up. I mean, if you go down to Rowan County and Kim Davis is running for, I don't know, 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 or 90 or 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 or 500 or 600 or 700 or 800 or 900 or 1000 or 2000 or 3000 or 4000 or 5000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 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 county clerk, she could be in fucking prison and she'd still get voted in, no matter what. And she switched parties from the Democrats to the Republicans because that's where all of her supporters are. But, you know, she's still probably going to have all the damn Democrats voting for her just because she's a religious martyr for their cause. People, as long as people continue to be stupid, we're going to get stupid politicians.
Well, yeah, I mean, there is no system. I mean, let's face it, there's absolutely no system that will make it. I'm just saying that, you know, as much as we can, start trying to take the mechanical failure points out of the system. And the districting is one of the big mechanical failure points. You know, it's something that currently, even if you assume people aren't crazy, makes it difficult to have your voice heard in the general election. And yeah, I mean, you know, we do have areas like, you know, lots of places in the Deep South, as you said, you know, you're not going to really run a social conservative in San Francisco. You're not going to run an atheist in a lot of places in the Deep South or in the Midwest. This is just a factor of, you know, those areas. Any district you create will reflect the overwhelming, you know, belief of the voters, of the electorates. But, unfortunately, in this case, what we do have here with the Tea Party is because they've done polls, and the Tea Party's not nearly as popular among the rank-and-file Republicans. It's just that, you know, by the time a lot of the rank-and-file Republicans get to vote, it's Tea Party or a Democrat. And that is a problem. And like I said, I really think the main reason that Boehner left is he just got tired. He just got tired of this never-ending fight.
Well, I would be too.
Yeah, well, I mean, his own party hated him. And this is going to be an issue because, just a couple of days ago, I read that, you know, the Tea Party got angry because their favorite wasn't going to make it in for House Speaker. And one of the things they were upset against is one of the current Republican favorites for House Speaker is a guy who apparently, you know, he likes talking to people, so he'll invite people in for long Cajun-style lunches. He's a Louisiana rep, and, you know, he'll invite both Democrats and Republicans in for long lunches, and they'll kind of like chew the fat and talk. And there was apparently some anger that this was a person who was obviously being too friendly with the Democrats. That's what you're supposed to do. You know, you got to make deals. And I think that is the worst problem is people have to understand is that government, we are not a dictatorship. The God Emperor of mankind is not going to ascend to the House Speaker position.
Yeah, but both parties wish we were.
Wish we were, but, you know, they got to learn because, you know, in all seriousness, and not only that, but I mean, I'd say another factor is that when you come with this all or nothing attitude, yeah, great. If you win, you get everything. You might want to consider what happens if you lose. You get nothing.
But they can't imagine that they'll ever lose.
Right. And that is an unfortunate point. So I'll say I, you know, didn't agree with him politically, but God Almighty, seriously, I would prefer to try to teach a class of high school students in the zombie apocalypse who had all been zombified and were trying to eat my brains rather than be House Speaker right now.
Yeah.
It would be less painful and it would be more exciting.
And you'd have a better chance of success.
Yes, actually, to think of it, the brain-eating zombies might actually be, you know, you might be able to get more work out of them politically. You know, just
they'd be more reasonable.
Granted, they kind of noshed on those House pages, but, you know, everyone wants to be a House page, so it's not like you have any shortage of supply. That's a lot.
All right, do we have anything else for the week?
No, but I would like to say something from Goldwater, actually, here.
Go for it.
Okay. One Goldwater said is that when he was talking about religion as a roadblock to freedom, and I am ever more angry as a legislator who must endure the threats of every religious group who thinks it has some God-granted right to control my vote on every roll call in the Senate. I am warning them today. I will fight them every step of the way if they try to dictate their moral convictions to all Americans in the name of conservatism. GOP, listen to Goldwater.
Well, they didn't listen to Goldwater back in '64. Why do you think they listen now?
Well, you might want to because they're losing more a lot now. I mean, you know, what Goldwater saw in 1964 is even more true today. I mean, and it's, you know, it's a case of, again, or at least think of the fact that there's a lot of people out there right now who would like to vote for you on economic grounds. You know, there are small business owners who are homosexuals. There are small business owners who are Latino and who growl and snarl when a new tax comes down the pike. They want to vote for you. They want to vote for small government. The Republican Party evidently doesn't want their votes.
Yeah, but the Republican Party has no interest in small government. They have not, in the past 50 years, ever met a chance to enlarge the government that they didn't go for. The Republican Party has nothing to do with conservatism. They are not conservative fiscally. They're not really even conservative, socially. They're religious wingnut, and that's it. You know, when it comes to fiscal issues, they're pretty much as liberal as the Democrats. They just do it a different way.
Well, they do it a different way. I mean, they don't so much like social spending as they do like,
military spending, but they still like spending.
Yeah,
That's the problem. Stop spending.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially, we really don't need, we spend as much as the next 10 countries combined. We can afford to cut that back a little bit. We are not in danger of the hordes of Liechtenstein invading Washington. Actually, I think the hordes of Liechtenstein are considerably outnumbered by Washington. But,
yes.
Regardless, you can call 20 people a horde. So, but yeah, I think that's about it.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Well, that was it. The Big Show 100. How'd we do? We'll be back next week with more religious and political stupidity as we begin our second 100 shows. Think we'll make it to show 200? Stick around and see. Maybe we'll even get some audience participation by then. I'm not betting on it. So until next week, farewell, everybody.
So, I'll see you then. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Bitchspot Report podcast. We invite listeners to interact with the show by commenting on our website at report.jdragononline.com. We can also be found on most social media sites, including Facebook, Google+, Tumblr, and Twitter. You can also listen on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Player FM, as well as on the aforementioned website. New episodes post every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. Those interested in being on the air, please visit our website. All instructions are there. We appreciate our listeners and supporters. We couldn't do this without you.